So picture this, 3 members of the Briarwood Gardens HOA board just standing there like mannequins in a panic. One of them dropped his phone, the other leaned in close and started whispering like they were in a spy movie. "We didn't see anything," he muttered, way too late for that line to save them. The shed door was hanging wide open now, and inside, every single crate was stamped in bold, government-grade ink. "Property of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms." Hey everyone! I'm so glad you're here. Every day, I bring you real and captivating stories from everyday life. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a moment. And today, I've got another emotional story to share with you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey. And guess what? Someone had just captured the entire scene on camera. That viewer? Probably wondering something like, "Wait, what the hell? How is any of this legal? And how did she not notice?" Great questions, honestly. But to really understand how a bunch of overzealous HOA volunteers ended up trespassing into what could easily pass for a mini military depot, we gotta rewind. Hi. I'm Tyler. I'm 35. Former Army logistics guy, now fully committed to living the quiet life. 4 p.m. beers, lawn mowing with a true crime podcast humming in my ears, and zero drama if I can help it. My home sits right on the edge of a little planned slice of suburban illusion known as Briarwood Gardens. Sounds fancy, right? Like maybe there's a koi pond and one of those spa waterfalls out back. Spoiler, there's not. Just row after row of same beige houses, 2 flower pots per porch, and an HOA that takes neighborhood conformity more seriously than some international peace treaties. Now here's the twist, my land? It's technically outside the HOA. Always has been. I scooped it up a few years back when the old farmhouse that sat here burned down and the developer gave up trying to shoehorn it into their cookie-cutter dreamland. I built myself a modest home and added a detached steel-reinforced shed, partly because I like working with tools, and maybe also because I enjoy the mild satisfaction of looking a little bit doomsday prepper adjacent. That exact shed? It's where the story really kicks off. An old buddy of mine, works for the ATF, once asked if I'd mind storing some extra gear for a bit. Just a temporary thing. Now before you imagine some Hollywood action scene, let me clarify. It wasn't bombs or anything dangerous. Just seized parts and equipment, all locked down under federal protocol. Nothing sketchy, all of it documented tighter than Fort Knox and legal all the way through. The kind of stuff you need 10 forms and a retinal scan just to sneeze near. Everything was quiet. Legal. Boring even. Until Karen caught wind of it. Now, for those unfamiliar with the species, Karen is our HOA queen bee. She's the kind of woman who treats bylaws like holy scripture. Drives a white Lexus with fake eyelashes on the headlights, owns 2 Shih Tzus, and has the aggressive charm of a middle school principal who just caught you chewing gum. From the moment she laid eyes on my shed, she hated it. Too gray. Not decorative. And worst of all, I refused to install the HOA-approved mailbox with the official community font. We were off to a bad start, and it only got worse. At first, it was letters. The kind with "Concerned Resident" in bold and multiple underlines. I laughed, tossed them in my trash, and carried on. Then she started showing up. Right around dinner time, always with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just checking in on zoning lines," she'd chirp, like she hadn't just trespassed to peek over my fence. I didn't open the shed unless I had to. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I knew exactly how fast a curious HOA board and a little imagination could turn a storage facility into a national threat. But Karen? She wasn't content to snoop solo. She assembled her own little squad. Tom, a retired dentist who watched too many crime shows and thought he was deep undercover, and Linda, a woman who once reported butterflies as a noise nuisance. Not even kidding. They patrolled the block in matching pastel windbreakers, peeking through fences and squinting into binoculars like they were on some neighborhood reconnaissance mission. I once caught Tom on a ladder across the street trying to see into my backyard. He lost his footing, nearly fell, and threatened to sue me, for having hostile landscaping. Then, last week, it finally escalated. I was out picking up some drill bits at the hardware store when I got an alert from one of my security cams. Movement near the shed. I pulled up the live feed and there they were, Karen, Tom, and Linda, standing by my gate, holding a pair of bolt cutters like they were on a special ops mission. My exact thought? No way. No freaking way they're actually doing this. But I forgot one crucial truth about HOA crusaders. When they think they're restoring order, they'll justify almost anything. They cut the lock. And I was still 15 minutes away. I drove like I had a rocket strapped to my truck, tires squealing around corners, heart pounding. Because by the time I got there, by the time I pulled into the driveway, they had already pried the shed open like raccoons on a midnight snack raid. I got there just in time to watch Linda raise her phone, ready to snap a photo. Then her hands started trembling so hard, she dropped it like it was hot coal. Tom's face had gone the shade of skim milk, and Karen was still muttering under her breath about how this was evidence, like repeating it would magically erase the fact that she had just trespassed and broken into a federally documented structure. So I did what any rational, mildly caffeinated man would do. I hit the record button on my phone, walked up nice and easy, coffee in one hand, camera rolling in the other, and said, "Well, hey there, folks. Hope you're enjoying the unauthorized tour. Just so we're clear, everything in this shed belongs to the federal government. So congrats, you've just racked up a list of felonies. Probably more than one." Karen went beet red. Linda looked like she might faint. Tom whispered the classic line of every amateur criminal caught in the act. "We didn't know." I just nodded, slow and steady. "Exactly why you don't go slicing into other people's sheds with bolt cutters like you're starring in a low-budget spy movie." And then, just when you think the story's reached peak stupid, it somehow levels up. Karen tried to spin it. Claimed she thought I was building something dangerous, that she had a responsibility, no, a duty, to investigate. Real noble, considering I had her on camera rifling through clearly marked crates labeled ATF evidence. Do not tamper in bold print big enough to read from orbit. And just to make it extra fun? My security system backs everything up to the cloud. 3 different clouds, actually. Automatic. Triple redundancy. Because I may be chill, but I'm not careless. She picked the wrong shed, on the wrong day, belonging to the very wrong guy. Now most folks? You catch them red-handed breaking into a federal evidence lockup, they slink away. Maybe cry. Apologize. At least pretend to feel bad. Not Karen. Nope. She spun on her heel and stomped off my property like she was still running the show, muttering something about calling her lawyer. It would have been funny if I wasn't already half done uploading the footage to my ATF contact. But just as she was marching away in full dramatic flair, I caught a glimpse of something odd. A piece of paper peeking out of her coat pocket. Looked like a map or a plan, I couldn't quite tell. Weird, but I made a mental note. Later that night, I checked my mailbox. And there it was. A freshly printed notice on some slick new letterhead I'd never seen before. The title read, "Notice of Induction. Your property has been voted into the Briarwood Gardens HOA effective immediately." Yeah. You heard that right. Not content with just breaking and entering, they tried to annex me. Like this was some HOA version of Napoleon trying to redraw the map with passive-aggressive bullet points. That was the moment I decided it was time to burn this whole charade to the ground, figuratively, of course. Karen had the gall to walk off like she was still queen of the cul-de-sac, her heels tapping out Morse code for delusion across my pavement. Meanwhile, I stood there, coffee getting cold in my hand, already outlining the next 10 moves in my head. Because you don't get to break into my property, walk straight into a federal operation, and then hit me with some half-baked bureaucratic power grab like you're running for prom queen. By sunrise I had 3 things ready to go: the footage from every one of my security cameras, a neatly organized folder with every message the HOA had ever sent me, paper and digital, and a quick, polite email to my buddy Derek at the ATF. Subject line: Unauthorized civilian access to active evidence lockup. Derek didn't waste time. He called me within the hour, already laughing so hard I could hear his coffee mug rattling against his desk. I laid it all out for him, sent the footage, and by lunchtime, the legal department at ATF had the whole package. His exact words? "They're about to get real cozy with the concept of federal trespassing." Meanwhile, Karen was doubling down like she thought this was blackjack and not felony bingo. That afternoon, I found another folded notice taped to my front door. New design. New logo. Looked more like a manifesto than a neighborhood update. This one claimed, again, that my property had been retroactively inducted into HOA jurisdiction. Retroactively. As if they could scribble over history with a sharpie and a sham vote. And the cherry on top? At the bottom of the letter, a $200 fine. For my shed. Non-compliant with aesthetic guidelines, it said. I stood there, holding that letter, staring at it for a good 30 seconds, trying to decide if I was living in a sitcom, a documentary about cults, or a really boring spy thriller. At this point, it was like I'd stepped straight into some suburban version of the Twilight Zone. Same houses. Same flower pots. But apparently, none of the usual laws of reality applied. That afternoon, believe it or not, Tom and Linda, yes, the very same two that had broken into my shed like overzealous mall cops, showed up at my front door again. This time they had smug grins plastered across their faces and, hilariously, a binder in hand like they were about to pitch me on a pyramid scheme. Tom cleared his throat and had the absolute gall to say, "We're just trying to resolve this civilly." I leaned on the porch railing and waved them up. Great. Quick question first. Does civilly include felony trespassing, forced entry, and rummaging through boxes clearly marked federal evidence? Linda started stammering some PR-sounding nonsense about protecting the community and public safety, but I cut her off cold. Reached behind me, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it over. Inside? A flash drive. Labeled in bold sharpie, Exhibit A. Tom didn't even look at it. His ears turned the color of ripe tomatoes, and he clamped his mouth shut. Binder tucked under his arm like a guilty schoolkid who just got caught copying answers off the smart kid's test, he turned and marched back down my walkway without another word. Linda trailed after him like a stunned ghost. What they didn't realize was that while they were trying to save face, the ATF was already cooking up something far more serious. Derek, my contact over there, had looped me in just hours earlier. He told me their legal team was actively reviewing the footage, debating whether to file formal charges or go the cease and desist route through federal channels. Personally, I was rooting for charges. Karen needed a good, hard reality check. HOA cosplay only works until you trip over a Rio badge and land face first in the legal system. But while Derek and the Alphabet Boys handled their side of the mess, I still had to deal with Karen's neighborhood theatrics. 2 days after the break-in, I found a formal-looking note taped to my mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting, attendance required. Required. Like I'd somehow been drafted into her suburban cult without consent. But hey, I was curious. And I knew it was going to be hilarious. The meeting was held, no joke, in Karen's garage. She decorated it like it was a corporate workshop. Plastic folding chairs in neat rows, store-brand lemonade on a folding table, and a hand-painted sign that read, Briarwood Gardens Civic Council. I nearly lost it. Karen stood at the front like she was delivering a keynote speech. Flanked by her trusty sidekicks, Tom and Linda, she launched into a dramatic monologue that would have fit right in on daytime TV. She accused me of endangering the community by storing unauthorized military materials. Then, for dramatic effect, she unveiled a blown-up photo of the crates in my shed, intentionally blurry and ominously captioned with hazardous content. I recognized it immediately. It was the same photo Linda had tried to take right before she dropped her phone in a panic. Karen rambled on for 5 full minutes while I sipped a lemonade, playing polite. Then I raised my hand like the quiet kid in the back of the class who just knows the teacher's wrong. She didn't want to call on me, I could see it, but eventually she did. I asked just one question, slow and clear. Are you aware you're accusing a federal contractor of illegally storing materials that are, in fact, documented and protected under ATF authority? Because if so, I really hope you've got an outstanding lawyer." The entire garage went dead silent. One guy in the back coughed. Karen blinked twice, twitch, and then, naturally, doubled down. Claimed she had spoken to a lawyer, and she was fully prepared to take this to court. Cute. Very cute. Because 10 minutes later, while the meeting was still rolling, my phone buzzed. Derek. I answered it on speaker, loud and chipper. "Hey, Derek! How's the federal investigation into neighborhood trespassing going?" Karen's face went pale like she just watched her retirement fund evaporate. But the real kicker? That came 2 days later. Derek called me again. This time, his voice was all business. The ATF had wrapped up their internal review. They'd decided not to press criminal charges yet, but they were issuing a formal cease and desist. The letter laid out, in no uncertain terms, that the HOA had trespassed on federal property, tampered with active evidence, and possibly interfered with an ongoing investigation. And it wasn't just some email attachment. Nope. This letter was going to be hand-delivered. Signature required. By a federal crier. The kind of delivery that turns stomachs and quiets entire households. And the cherry on top? The ATF was also notifying the HOA's insurance provider. Which meant Karen now had to explain why her clipboard brigade was caught on camera inside a federal evidence lockup. That's not a conversation you win with lemonade and binder tabs. I wasn't home when the letter arrived, but my neighbor Ted texted me the moment he saw it go down. A man in a suit, official badge in hand, walked right up to Karen's front door and delivered the envelope like it was wrapped in thunder. Ted said she stood there frozen for 10 solid minutes afterward, clutching it like she'd just been handed a divine summons. And that very night? The Briarwood Gardens HOA website mysteriously vanished from the internet. No homepage. No contact tab. Not even an "Oops, we're down for maintenance" message. Was it fear? Embarrassment? Or maybe the weight of finally realizing she wasn't running a neighborhood, she was running a delusion. Whatever it was, it worked. Karen didn't show her face for days. It took her 48 hours. When Karen finally emerged from hiding, she was different. A little quieter, a touch less smug. But I've known her long enough to recognize the subtle twitch behind her eyes, the gears still grinding away in that clipboard-sized mind of hers. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got a certified letter in the mail. But this one wasn't from Karen. Wasn't from the HOA either. No, this came from a man I'd never heard of, claiming to be legal counsel for something called the Briarwood Gardens Civic Association. Because apparently, when you get slapped by the ATF, you don't back down, you rebrand. The letter accused me of reckless endangerment, possession of prohibited materials, and my personal favorite, conduct unbecoming of a community member. Like I'd violated some sacred suburban code of honor. They were trying to rattle me, flood the room with legal smoke so no one noticed the fire was their fault to begin with. I smiled, folded the letter in half, and dropped it onto my ever-growing stack of HOA absurdities. They didn't know. None of them knew. Not yet. Because by faking my inclusion into their HOA fantasy land, they triggered something. Something important. A clause buried in their own charter. A clause that made the entire HOA structure not just invalid, but technically illegal. And I had the receipts. Now, this next move? This wasn't about federal law anymore. The feds had already dropped the hammer. This part? This was about burning down Karen's little kingdom from the inside. Ashes to HOA ashes. The thing about people like Karen is they never know when to let go. She could have taken the ATF's letter as a cosmic hint, backed off, and gone back to judging porch paint and counting flower pots. But no. Karen saw a federal cease and desist and treated it like a dare. And that was perfect. Because while she was busy trying to hold the line, I was already digging at the foundation. It all started with that fake induction letter. The one that said my land had been voted into the HOA. That's not how HOAs work. You can't just redline your neighbor's lot like you're carving up territory in a fantasy novel. But it made me wonder, just how deep did this little lie go? So I started pulling records. Dug through the county clerk's office and unearthed the original development plans for Briarwood Gardens. Turns out, the HOA charter had a clearly defined boundary, established when the neighborhood was built 15 years ago. And my land? Not just outside of it, but recorded on a completely separate deed, tied to the old farmhouse that used to stand here. But here's the kicker. 2 years ago someone, guess who, filed a quiet little amendment. It claimed the HOA boundaries had been expanded. For community uniformity. It wasn't legally binding. Wasn't even properly submitted for county approval. But they filed it anyway, and then started acting like it had teeth. That's fraud. Full stop. So I took everything I'd gathered and dropped it on the desk of a real estate attorney I know. Guy's sharp as a box cutter and twice as quick. I handed him the files and asked one question. How fast can we make this implode? He grinned. Faster than you'd think. He combed through everything, bylaws, expansion attempts, and the absolute circus of Karen's enforcement strategy. Within an hour, he'd found not one, but 3 different clauses that invalidated any enforcement outside the original boundary line. The moment they tried to find me, they broke their own rules. And that opened the door, not just to challenge the HOA's reach, but to question whether it should exist at all. But Karen? She was still marching forward like the queen of a collapsing sandcastle. That same week, she sent out one of her infamous neighborhood-wide emails. You could practically hear the caps lock slamming through the screen. She accused me, again, of endangering the community, spreading misinformation, and resisting integration into a shared neighborhood vision. She made it sound like I was running a fringe survivalist compound instead of just owning a home with a steel-reinforced shed. But here's what Karen didn't see coming. The more noise she made, the more curious people got. At first, it was whispers, quick comments, cautious side glances. Then it got louder. People started knocking on my door. A retired couple from the corner, former schoolteachers, told me Karen once fined them for planting marigolds because they weren't on the approved flora list. Seriously. Marigolds. Another neighbor admitted she got written up because her dog barked during the day. And then one guy, honest fella, seemed decent, confessed he'd once paid a review fee for repainting his garage door. Karen told him it was mandatory. Spoiler, it wasn't. The neighborhood had been living under the shadow of a paper crown, arbitrary fines, made-up bylaws, and the illusion of authority held together with clip art and fear. But folks were starting to wake up. Starting to see the cracks. And that gave me an idea. Nothing flashy. Just a one-page flyer. No yelling, no name-calling, just plain facts printed in black and white. It laid out the original HOA boundaries, showed exactly how my property wasn't, and never had been, part of the HOA, explained how the so-called boundary expansion wasn't legal, and encouraged every homeowner to pull their own property records from the county and double-check what they'd been told. I tucked the flyers into mailboxes one quiet Sunday morning while walking my dog. A peaceful stroll, sunshine on my shoulders, leash in one hand, stack of reality checks in the other. 2 days later, Karen was screaming in the middle of the street about illegal propaganda. And the best part? At least 2 teenagers caught the meltdown on video. One posted it online with the caption, HOA Karen goes feral over printer paper. 30,000 views in a single day. Suburbia had a new villain, and her name was trending. But the real pressure? That was building quietly, behind the scenes. My lawyer filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board. Requested an emergency review of the HOA's charter. We sent over everything, evidence of their fake boundary expansion, fines issued outside their jurisdiction, and clear signs that the board, especially Karen, had knowingly stepped outside their legal lane. And then the hammer dropped. The county notified the Briarwood Gardens HOA that they were now officially under investigation for abuse of authority. Effective immediately, all HOA enforcement actions were to be suspended. No more fines. No more courtesy notices. Just silence and scrutiny. Karen was served the notice in person, right in the middle of one of her morning patrols. A zoning officer, clipboard in hand, the irony wasn't lost on me, walked up to her porch and handed it over. She tried to argue. He didn't say a word. Just turned and walked away, leaving her clutching that letter like it was the last rose at a very disappointing reality show finale. The board meetings got quiet after that. Then they got private. Real hush-hush. But it was already too late. Word had spread like wildfire through the tulip beds. Neighbors started organizing. Asking questions. A few of them requested access to the HOA's financial records, something they're legally entitled to. Karen stalled. Dodged. Delayed. That's when someone, bless their nosy little heart, found it. A second bank account. Unlisted on public records. Labeled for Community Improvement Initiatives. Except, no new benches. No extra landscaping. No events. Just thousands of dollars in dues that had quietly evaporated into what looked suspiciously like Karen's wellness retreat budget. And that was it. The final crack in the dam. At the next board meeting, held in someone's driveway, because nobody wanted Karen in their house anymore, an older man stood up. Quiet guy. Always raked his leaves on schedule, never said a bad word about anybody. But that day, he brought the thunder. He had a binder. Pages of printouts. Copies of checks made out to cash. Transaction logs with dates, missing receipts, you name it. The place exploded. Voices yelling over one another. People demanding answers. Karen trying, and failing, to shout everyone down. Me? I just stood in the back, sipping lemonade, watching it all burn. Watching the queen of beige tyranny melt under the very spotlight she'd turned on everyone else for years. But I wasn't done. With their legal foundation collapsing faster than Karen's credibility, my lawyer filed one last motion, a formal request to dissolve the HOA charter. The grounds? Fraud, misuse of authority, and member misrepresentation. The county investigated. And their findings? Brutal. The original charter was ruled void due to procedural misconduct. All active bank accounts were frozen, pending a full financial audit. And just like that, Briarwood Gardens HOA ceased to exist. Poof. You'd think that'd be the end of it. That Karen would pack up her clipboards, delete her mailing lists, and retreat into the beige vinyl siding of her home like a ghost of HOA past. But if you thought that, you still don't fully grasp the raw, chaotic energy of a woman like Karen. Exactly 1 week later, just as the dust was starting to settle, I got a new notice. Different logo. Different letterhead. Same deranged signature at the bottom. She had started something called the Briarwood Civic Wellness Committee. No legal standing. No funding. Just a Facebook page, a Word doc template, and the same desperate thirst for power. Taped to the bottom of the letter was a handwritten warning. All structures must still conform to neighborhood unity guidelines. Unity guidelines. She really thought she could start over. Build a new fake HOA from the ashes of the old one and pretend none of this ever happened. But this time, she wasn't filing fake fines or mailing passive-aggressive notices. No, this time, she went old school. Tried to get under my skin the classic suburban way. By spying. 2 days after her letter arrived, I noticed something strange while mowing the yard. A little glint up high in a tree, tucked behind a bundle of leaves, just out of reach unless you were looking for it. A camera. Pointed straight at my back patio. Once I traced the camera's angle, it didn't take long to find the signal. A little digital breadcrumb trail, bouncing through the air like it had something to hide. And where did it lead? Right to a network named, wait for it, Wellness HQ. Subtle, Karen. Real subtle. That's when it hit me. The HOA might be legally dead, the charter ash, the accounts frozen, but Karen? She wasn't finished. She'd declared war. And she was about to find out I still had a few cards she hadn't seen played yet. Now, you'd think after watching her HOA get dissolved by the county, watching the legal structure collapse like a Jenga tower in a wind tunnel, Karen would take the loss and go quietly. But no. Karen doesn't lose. She rebrands. Like this was HOA 2.0, launching with the same nonsense and even less oversight. She called it the Briarwood Civic Wellness Committee. No official power. No legal structure. Just a Facebook page, some printer paper, and a bad case of authority withdrawal. No one asked for it. No one voted. But she slapped flyers on mailboxes anyway, like she was handing out divine proclamations. And of course, I was still target number one. The first time I spotted the camera, I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. Hidden in a leafy cluster, mounted just right to peer over at my back patio. All it caught was me reading, sipping coffee, watching squirrels settle petty disputes over peanuts. Nothing worth spying on. But it wasn't about what I was doing, it was about control. Karen didn't care about rules anymore. She wanted a front row seat to the show. So I did what any stubborn ex-army guy with a grudge and some free time would do. I traced the signal. Like I said, I know how. And sure enough, the feed was running live through Wellness HQ. I smiled. Karen never could help naming things like she was branding an energy drink. But I didn't go nuclear. Not yet. That's the trick with people like Karen. You blow up too fast, they think they've won. No, you let them get cozy. Let them think they're winning. So I installed a dummy camera. Plain, obvious, right there on the shed. Pointed at nothing in particular. Just a quiet little dare. Within 2 days, her camera was gone. Pulled from the tree like it had never existed. Classic Karen maneuver, retreat, regroup, pretend it never happened. But of course, she couldn't leave it alone. A week later, another flyer appeared on my door. Same font, same tone, same passive-aggressive sunshine. This one warned me about excessive mechanical activity on my property. Apparently using a power drill was now a threat to neighborhood serenity. That was it. Time to bring the storm. See, what Karen didn't realize was that the ATF investigation. It had never been formally closed. No charges, sure, but her name was still on a list. A little footnote tied to trespassing and tampering with federal evidence. And remember that blurry photo of the ATF crates? The one she whipped out at that HOA meeting like it was proof of a crime? Yeah. Turns out she shared that image in a Facebook group. In a fake HOA newsletter. And as part of her phony legal complaint. 3 separate times. 3 separate counts of unauthorized distribution tied to a federal case. She'd slipped under the radar because, frankly, no one took her seriously. Until now. So I picked up the phone and called Derek. He didn't laugh this time. Just sighed, long and low, and muttered, "Why do people think federal is just a fancy word for optional?" He asked me to send everything I had, camera trace, flyers, social posts. I sent it all. 3 days later, Derek called me back. His voice was clipped, focused. The bureau had reopened their file. Meanwhile, Karen was throwing a party. Not just any party, bunco night. If you've never had the pleasure, imagine a dice game crossed with a suburban wine cult, hosted by women in rhinestone sweaters and thinly veiled contempt for each other. It's less about winning and more about gossip, judgment, and Chardonnay-fueled tyranny. Karen invited the neighborhood. Or, at least, the people she still thought liked her. I didn't get an invite, obviously. But my neighbor Ted did. He let me know the whole thing was going down at Karen's house, complete with themed snacks, wine pairings, and a special community standards discussion between rounds. Because nothing screams fun night out like being reminded your porch light is too bright. So I stayed home. Sat in my backyard. Let the breeze roll in, sipped some iced tea, and listened to the low hum of cicadas. Let the tension in the air stretch tight like fishing line. And then, right around 8:30 p.m. I heard it. A siren. Not loud. Not frantic. Just a calm, steady whoop, the kind that doesn't come looking for trouble, but knows exactly where to find it. I glanced toward the street and there it was. A black SUV with government plates easing down the road like it belonged there. Then came another SUV. Then 2 more unmarked cars creeping along behind it, quiet as ghosts. No sirens. No lights. Just a slow, deliberate stop right in front of Karen's house. And when the doors opened, 3 agents stepped out, business casual, all jackets and calm authority, adjusted their cuffs, and walked straight up to her door. Inside, the bunker ladies were on round 3. Giggles, gossip, and grocery store Chardonnay flowing like it was the fountain of truth. Someone must have assumed it was another guest at the door, probably there to join in the zoning code slander and lemon bar judging. Instead, gasps. One loud thud. Then a silence so thick, it felt like gravity itself was holding its breath. The kind of silence that only settles when someone's entire delusional world folds in on itself like a cheap lawn chair. And then, there she was. Karen. Escorted out of her own house in fuzzy pink slippers and a rhinestone-studded headband, still gripping her wine glass like it might shield her from federal law. She was sputtering something about rights and warrants and the Constitution, but the agents? They didn't flinch. One of them handed her a real warrant, signed, stamped, and sealed tighter than her former bank accounts. The charges were serious enough to authorize a full search, evidence tampering, unauthorized distribution of classified material, and obstruction of an ongoing investigation. Karen tried to spin it, said it was all just HOA business, that she was protecting the community, that the photos weren't real. The agents didn't debate. They didn't lecture. They walked her down the driveway, past the neatly trimmed hedges and pastel folding chairs, past her stunned wine-sipping guests still clutching scorecards mid-game. And then they guided her, gently, respectfully, into the back of the black SUV. I didn't film it. I didn't need to. A teenager down the street caught the whole thing on their phone and uploaded it to Reddit before the squad car even hit the corner. The title? Absolute gold. Karen gets raided during bunco night after trying to police a shed. It went viral in hours. Tens of thousands of views. Then hundreds. The comments section turned into a creative writing festival. Memes, theories, spin-off plots. My personal favorite? A loop gif of Karen being led to the SUV with the caption, "This is what happens when the HOA becomes the CIA." Karen spent the night in federal holding. She wasn't formally arrested, but they did their due diligence, questioned her, fingerprinted her, seized her phone and laptop for evidence. She got released the next morning with a stern warning, a pending court date, and the kind of gag order that doesn't leave room for interpretation. No more flyers. No more wellness committee. No more peeking through the bushes and playing surveillance games like it was Cold War suburbia. She came home looking like someone had wiped her soul clean with a wet napkin. Hollow-eyed. Defeated. Mailbox overflowing with refund demands from neighbors who'd donated to her little dream of civic domination. Her Facebook group? Shut down. Her beloved tree-mounted spy cam? Gone. Disconnected, confiscated, filed away somewhere deep in a federal evidence vault labeled Suburban Madness, Exhibit B. And I thought, maybe this was finally it. Maybe she'd sit in her house, bake apology cookies, and start working on that self-help memoir she always hinted at. Zoning peacefully, finding inner power through passive aggression. But nope. The following Friday, as I was out in the yard planting tomatoes and enjoying the quiet, I saw her. She walked slowly past the edge of my property, not on it, mind you. Just close enough. She didn't say a word. Just stared. And smiled. Not the friendly kind of smile. Not the, "How's your garden doing?" neighborly grin. No. This was the smile of someone who still thinks they're playing a game. A smile that says this isn't over. And that's just fine. Because I'm not done either. Karen may have lost her HOA, her committee, and her iron grip on Briarwood Gardens. But I've still got the shed. And as far as I'm concerned, it's now the most heavily defended lawn ornament in the continental United States. Let her try something again. I've got backup now, legal, federal, and digital. And next time she crosses the line, it won't be bunco night that gets ruined. It'll be the rest of her. And just like that, we've reached the end of this story. If you stayed with me until the very last moment, thank you truly. Your subscription means the world and helps this channel grow. I've also picked out 2 more videos I think you'll really enjoy. Be sure to check them out. I'll see you again very soon with another story. Until then, take care.